Welcome to the AFA Inspire webinar. Today I have with me two very important ladies that have carved out their career in advice, slightly different, one in law and one in financial advice. Thank you so much for joining us today, Deb and Faye. I'll just talk to you a little bit about who these ladies are. Faye Calderone is an employment lawyer for Dibbs & Barker. She has worked heavily in the field of law for some time. She is recognised as an emerging leader in 2014 with the NAB Women's Agenda Leadership Award. And let me say, her pedigree continues on. What I highly recommend is that you refer to the bio that we posted in the event. If not, I'm more than happy to email it to you. Deborah Kent, you know probably very, very well. She's certainly one of the influencers in the financial advice profession. She was the past president of the AFA. She is a financial advisor first and foremost. She is was the treasurer of the AFA, but more importantly than all of that, she is the founder of Inspire. Let's face it, we are all very, very pleased, Deb, that you created Inspire as a platform for all of us to participate in. I have a really interesting topic today, everybody. It's gender diversity at the top and how do we get there? This conversation started earlier this year at the International Women's Day events for Inspire and has continued on throughout the year, both at the Inspire Roadshow and certainly within our state-based events. It's a topic that I'm sure is close to all of our hearts and a topic that I know we're going to enjoy talking to Faye about today. I just ask that today, when you have questions, that you be respectful. We are asking Faye here as a guest, and she has kindly taken time out of her very busy working day to join us. If you could drop your questions into the chat box, we will be moderating and making sure that we pull those questions together. And we hopefully, after we finish our Q&A, we'll indulge in some of those questions with Faye. I promise, Faye, we won't do anything nasty. We'll just share them with you. Welcome, Faye and Deb. It's great to have you with me.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you for having us. Good to be here, Jen.
No worries. All right. Well, let's dive in since we have a really limited time and loads of questions for you, Faye. I hope you are ready for a deep dive into gender diversity at the top and how do you get there. So, Faye, I know you've had the pleasure of meeting you and obviously had the opportunity to read your bio, but I'd really love you to share with the audience your backstory on how you've got to where you are today.
Yeah, no problem. The bits that we chatted about that are not in the bio that I share with you with pleasure. Look, I grew up, my parents had shops in Western Sydney. I was publicly educated out there, and growing up I wanted to be a lawyer, loved People's Court, but having visited some of the local law firms and followed family and criminal lawyers around during my school holidays in Blacktown, I very quickly realised that I didn't have the tenacity or heart for either of those areas, and that I wanted to do something that was more commercially focused, but with a human element to it. So that's how I deliberately set out to study HR law, and I'm very pleased that I did. I was, however, conscious that I wasn't of a pedigree background, and that in order to get my big break into law or into a good law firm, that I needed to work very hard during uni. So I did work full-time as an elite law clerk in the last couple of years of my law degree, and then I unashamedly begged for my first job in a big law firm. And after a couple of attempts, the boss that I really connected with at the time, who was the practice group leader, he gave me my break, and it was a fantastic start into a legal career as a employment lawyer working for big corporates. And it was a great experience. He then set up a boutique law firm, and I followed him across. So got some great experience setting up a business by virtue of that experience, and was with him for 6 years. I then, a decade ago, had my firstborn son, Christian, and at the time I was living way out west, and work was in the city. So he was very kind to let me, work from home or work flexibly, and I was transitioning back to work in the CBD when a role was advertised for a firm in Parramatta, a full-service commercial firm that was looking for a employment lawyer to basically set up that practice and to build that employment law team. So I was concerned it would be a backward step. I was concerned I would fail fast. I was concerned I was going to, do all the wrong things in all the wrong places. But I was persuaded by a very, invested career, what's called recruiter, to take the plunge, and I did, and I'm very glad I did. It turned out to be a wonderful opportunity. We built during the GFC. Obviously, businesses were looking at alternate providers. The cost base in Western Sydney allowed me to compete with the big end of town, and in a manner that was actually quite successful. I launched the Workplace Solutions brand in that practice, and it was a different service offering and a different lens in the practice, and it allowed us to build and develop a very good reputation in Western Sydney around the time of my second born, who's now 5. And then a couple of years ago, Dibs Barker came knocking on the door and were very keen to basically make an offer to me to come back to town. And it was the right time in my career. It was the right time personally and professionally. And it's been an incredible 2 years here, having launched the People and Workplace brand and really focused on things like diversity, things like focusing more on the culture of the workplace and not just putting out fires, but basically making a real impact and having quite a purposeful practice.
So I know Faye from Matthews Folbig days, and I have to say to everyone out there, it's been a pleasure to watch Faye grow and get to where she is now. So I'm very excited that she's with us. So Faye, tell us, gender diversity is gaining so much traction at the moment in media, social media. Why do you think this is an important discussion for organisations?
Well, not a day goes past at the moment that we don't have research released about how profitable it is to have women on boards and how beneficial it is to have women in leadership roles. We know that diverse teams make better decisions, deliver better outcomes to the business. A KPMG report recently demonstrated that in the ASX 300, the female CEOs delivered a 9% return as compared to 0.5% across the male, across the average. So we know that it is better for business, but we also know that we are well underrepresented. In the ASX 200, there's only 3.5% female CEOs. There's only 16.5% female board representation in Australia. Around the world, the statistics largely mirror that. And we also know that it's going to be, according to EY, another 117 years before we achieve parity when it comes to income. Now, that's a multifaceted issue. There's so many issues at play there, but we know that there are benefits and we know that there is a very long way to go. And the only way one of the material ways that we're going to make advancements and get there is to have the conversation and to raise that awareness.
So Faye, how is inclusion different to diversity? In your experience, how is inclusion being the differentiator, and that diversity initiatives will fail unless there's an inclusion, and that's the main focus?
Yeah, this is one of the main points that we have been working on with clients and that I drill home. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked how to dance. Being asked to dance. Diversity is about the numbers. It's the quantity. Who's sitting at the table? We're looking at diversity obviously being gender diversity, cultural orientation, sexual orientation. So it's it's a numbers game, but the quality of the diversity, the quality of the initiatives will not be delivered unless the practices are inclusive, unless the people that are at the table are actually being invited to bring their views, and their views are being considered, and the strengths of the diverse team are being harnessed. Inclusion is about purposefully being involved in the conversation and not being sucked into group think. And so it's only through inclusion that the benefits of diversity will be harnessed, and that's precisely the finding of the Deloitte Access Economics report this year in relation to Queensland boards. But they found that there would be an $87 million productivity gain through diversity initiatives, but that inclusion was a critical success component, that without inclusion the benefits would not be reaped.
So, Faye,
before you jump on, Deb, I was just wondering, from your experience, Faye, is there particular professions or industries that are more likely to behave with an inclusive, I guess, mindset as opposed to a diverse approach, which is, as you say, on the flip side of the equation?
Look, I've noticed that a key differentiator is people that are engaged specifically for diversity and inclusiveness initiatives. So if they've got a D&I officer, or if they've got a HR person that has, a specific portfolio, then there is that heightened awareness. And so it's not just, what report do we need to fill out and who do we need to bring to the table. They have educated people there that are basically investing in those initiatives and want to see the benefits long term. I think that, obviously it's a very good step in the right direction that we're having the conversation and we're getting the numbers at the table, but we need to reap the benefits in order to have that sustainability.
So this is not just about women?
Absolutely not. Yeah, no. Diversity has to be across. The initiatives need to be across the board, and the more diverse the team. Cultural diversity is receiving a lot of attention in mainstream media as well, and it is important because we do bring different things to the table. If you look at the ASX 100, I saw a study that said if they were a report that said if they were 100 people, we would have only 2 culturally diverse women, we would have 6 Anglo-Saxon women, and then we would have 28 culturally diverse men, and then the balance would be 64 Anglo-Saxon men. And you would have seen a lot of the reports out there saying that there's more likely to be a guy called Peter or John, I can't remember the name, but simple male name is more commonly represented than females on boards at the moment. So the cultural diversity piece, I think, is an important one, and there are some people out there that are making real gains, getting real momentum in terms of the benefits and, in fact, the double jeopardy that we have in achieving those positions.
So, Faye, there's a lot of discussion around flexible work hours and flexibility for both men and women, including there was a national day for flexibility work day just dedicated to this particular discussion. How critical is it to increase the participation of women back into the workforce by having flexible hours?
Yeah, look, flexible work for all is something that I've been harping on about, as other people in mainstream media for quite some time. We talk about the concept of wife drought, and just if you look at it just purely on a personal level, so long as females are showing up to work and working full time or working the hours that they work and carrying a full load in the workplace and going home and doing a full load at home with children staying up through the night, cooking meals, doing them more than their fair share of the caring responsibilities, we will always be at a disadvantage, purely from an exhaustion point of view. You just cannot have, and if your male counterparts are going home to a home cooked meal, like this is completely sexist, but this is the reality of the environment that we have seen operating for quite some time. They're going home to a home cooked meal, wash clothes, and putting their feet up at night. In the boardroom the next day, we will be at a disadvantage. So flexibility for all is critical because that's the only way that we're going to get balance and equity in the distribution of work in the workplace, and also the distribution of the home, the homework, so to speak, the picking up the children. So flexibility for work is critical. For all is critical. The other thing is that with the advancement of technology, there's no I mean, the boundaries or the barriers to flexible work have significantly diminished. And, you know, I read Women's Agenda is a fantastic publication, obviously, and one that, you know, on a daily basis puts out things about, you know, equity and flexible work. And, you know, some great initiatives and recommendations in there. But I mean, Angela Priestley recently said, I think around that flexible work day, work isn't something, a place you go. It should be something that you do. And a great leader should be able to harness and get, you know, productivity out of their staff and know what their staff are delivering without having to be looking over their shoulders or, you know, having them within the four walls of the workplace. So we have an environment where quite clearly, you know, the future of work is such that we are able to work more flexibly. The technology is available. Workplaces are evolving to allow it, but it's important that they are evolving to allow it for all and for men in order for us to achieve true equality. And we need to break down those stereotypes, and we can't be turning our nose up at men that take the time off because, you know, and worried about the dreaded precedent that you know, giving someone flexibility, you know, creates. So it has to be okay.
I recently read an article that came out of Stanford that said, you know, if businesses are not looking towards having, you know, their employees working from home, they need to rethink their business model. Just a quick one on the end of that. Being in the role that you're in, do you see that that's a difficulty for employers to get the fact that someone's working from home rather than they can see them in the office?
Look, as lawyers and in professional services, it's easy to track the work that people do because we bill by 6-minute increments. So you need to account for, you know, every 6 minutes of your day. So personally, I can tell you that in the very limited period of time that I did work from home, that I didn't particularly enjoy, I might add, because I like people too much. The reality was that I felt more pressure to record that time and to, you know, you couldn't demonstrate, you couldn't just say I've shown up 9 to 5 and I've been here for the day and look, you know, I only got 4 hours worth of work done, but, you know, so be it. If you're at home, you actually are more inclined to demonstrate that performance because that's all you've got, you know, that those numbers on a page. As a leader, I like to think that, you know, you need to enable people and you need to give them, you know, the freedom and the flexibility to deliver the work, you know, in the way that is most appropriate for them. Now, if you're, you know, a leader of someone that has children and has, you know, a lot of competing priorities, the reality is if you give them the freedom to do the work when and however they can do it, they will be more loyal to you and they generally will go the extra mile to deliver for you because that is an arrangement they want to work out as much as you do.
So what other initiatives and systemic changes are required to accelerate more women into leadership roles from your view?
Yeah, look, there's a lot. The system, obviously, the issues in relation to the progression of women into leadership roles are both systemic and then there are, you know, some personal initiatives that we can take. But from the system point of view, I think that there quite clearly needs to be a commitment from the top. It can't be something that we just pay lip service to. There absolutely needs to be an appreciation for the need for diversity of the top, the benefits that will bring, and a commitment to it. And then that needs to trickle down. It needs to trickle down into, you know, in policies, procedures, employment contracts, KPIs. People should be incentivised for diversity initiatives. It's not just something that, you know, is a motherhood statement that we put on our website and, you know, sort of clap our hands together and say we're a great diverse employer. That should be something that is, that there are KPIs and the quantifiable objectives that need to be delivered, and then obviously the inclusion initiatives and the programs then need to ensure that we get the benefits out of that quantity. We need to consider things like essential and desirable criteria in job descriptions and in assessing people for promotions. You know, I really challenge some of the assertions. I think you know, there's that whole piece around unconscious bias that we all need, many people need a lot more education about. I am concerned, and I increasingly hear both, you know, in my professional capacity in the legal profession, but also with clients, you know, this concept of meritocracy, and I am concerned that, you know, unconscious bias hides behind that meritocracy and it perpetuates the status quo. In order to be a CEO, do you have to have been a CEO? And if that's the case, you need experience to be a CEO. We've only got a very limited pool that we're drawing upon. So is it an essential criteria? I have one particular client that is global and a fantastic HR director there working with engineers. And she did two things and that I, you know, absolutely advocate for. The first thing she did was ensure that there was parity on the way in for graduates, because she found that the male graduates were negotiating higher pay increases than the female graduates. So the females just assumed it was a starting salary, whereas the males always thought, well, the males thought it was negotiable. So right from the entry point, and the statistics establish it, there was disparity. So she was auto-correcting. So either the men didn't get as much as they asked for, or if they did, the women's pay rise was lifted. So at least they're starting on a level platform. And then the other thing that she did was actually remove the essential and desirable criteria from the promotion advertisements, because she found that if the woman saw that there was essential criteria and they could only meet 9 of the 10, like they couldn't meet one of the essential criteria, they would not go for the promotion, whereas the men would have a crack if they could establish about half of them. Now, a lot of this is anecdotal, but there's also, you know, a lot of people are saying the same thing. So there is definitely data and, you know, some research pieces around it. So we've got to understand that there are those differences, and then we need to work to correct them systemically and as organisations, because I don't think they're going to fix themselves. So they certainly haven't today.
So that brings me to this topic that I'm sure everyone sitting out there is looking for. We know that some statistics came out recently around women are not necessarily great at negotiation skills, and you've touched on that.
Yeah.
The other and you know, Sheryl Sandberg talks about mentors and she talks about sponsors. So how can our participants out there get something out of what do they need to do as far as maybe negotiation or some of these other areas to help push themselves along?
Yeah, there's a WGA report on this, and there's definitely, you know, the empirical evidence is out there in relation to stereotypes and the women negotiating. It was interesting, that report talked about the fact that negotiating was perceived to be more of a male-dominated domain, and that as females were more caring and supportive of each other by nature, and that if we act outside particular gender stereotypes, then there is a social backlash against us, which means that, you know, we're more likely to be disliked, and therefore we're less likely to engage in that behaviour. So it's not that we're less competitive. As you know, as a mentor to and the leader of a number of professional women, like having managed a number of professional women, I can tell you that they are fiercely competitive. There's no question about their ambition or their competitiveness. It comes back to, I guess, Tracy Spicer's describes it, the good girl. I'm reading her book, Good Girl Stripped Bare, at the moment. It's that sort of gender stereotypes that we're, and norms, societal norms that we're expected to work within. So we need to push beyond that, and, like, you know, to some extent, yes, Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In does come into play, but we can't sort of also get in the mindset of, you know, it's about fixing women, because the system is manifestly unfair in some respects. And like I said, it's, you know, even if you do push back, there is to some extent, you know, that backlash about women being too aggressive or too assertive. I suppose that as far as takeaway points, because it's all well and good talking about the system and how crap it is, but if we don't, you know, take things away from these discussions, it's probably not particularly helpful. It's only depressing. So takeaway points that I would recommend is that you prepare. You know what your worth is, you know what you bring to the table, and you look at the, sort of business's strategy, and you work out where you fit within that matrix and how you bring value and what it is that you really do bring to the table. And you don't need to be aggressive in that discussion. You just need to know your worth and walk in knowing that you're worthy, sort of push past. I know you've had Suzanne Mercier on, push past that imposter syndrome that I'm lucky to be here, I'm not good enough, oh geez, it would be nice if they pay me. You need to know your worth and you need to stand your ground when you walk in. You need to do your research. Look at the salary surveys online. I mean, a lot of the larger recruiters produce them. Know what the market rates that are. Have conversations with recruiters if you can dare to have them, and know your worth walking into the conversation. Not because you want, again, to put an ultimatum on the table, but you know that you are worthy, so you can confidently have that conversation rather than being sheepish in the chair. You should have look at things like, depending obviously on the industry, but definitely in professional services, you look at revenue, you look at your cost base, you look at your profitability, and be mindful of the figures, and to the extent that they are available to you, looking at the comparisons and making sure that transparency is key. And from a system point of view, organisations that want to achieve parity and want to achieve the acceleration of women should have transparency around that hard data, because it should be easily accessible, and that's the only way that we can have a healthy dialogue about these things that isn't just I'm entitled and I want more. It's about this is where I stand, this is the value I bring, and I deserve more. So all of those things I think should be contemplated, and then I would say sponsorship is critical. I am so much better at advocating for my staff than I have ever been for myself, and that it was so fascinating to read it in that WGA report. They say that because that goes back to our stereotype, that goes back to our helping nature, we think it's okay to negotiate, and to negotiate quite hard for people that work for us in a way that we wouldn't for ourselves. So I suppose the takeaway is find someone, be with leaders that know your worth and that respect you, because they will fight for you, harder. Particularly women will fight for you harder than you will ever fight for yourself. And if you don't have a leader like that, because we can't all be, blessed with great leaders, then have, a mentor or a coach that you can talk to, or, a sponsor outside the organisation or outside the group that you can bounce things off and say, look, this is what I think, this is what I'm thinking to say, and they can play a bit of devil's advocate so you can have that dialogue.
Do you think it takes a little bit of tenacity and resilience as well? Hearing your opening, you said that you bashed on the door until you got your first role. Yeah. You think there's a little bit of that in there too? Get a bit of resilience and tenacity.
And you go through stages, I find, in your career. Like, I know that I think back at how bullish I was on the way in, and I actually think that I was probably braver and more tenacious back then than sometimes I am now. But and like now I've taken that different role. Like I said, I'll advocate for my staff a lot more, but I think I came into the profession with a lot. I tweeted today with Kirsten Ferguson about my careers advisor telling me that girls from public schools in Western Sydney don't become lawyers, and that was something that came through in one of the Celebrating Women tweets, and I said, oh, that's what my careers advisor said. And I think in those early stages you've got that, hey, I'll show them, but then you sort of get there and you don't want to be entitled. You don't want to sort of feel like you're you don't want to be that person. So it's a bit of a balance.
Maybe that's where the tenacity came from.
Yeah.
I'm the same. I came from the West, and I pushed down the barriers and I fought my way through because that was inbuilt in me, I guess, because of where I came from. So how, as individuals, as leaders in this space, regardless of what position we have, how can we empower people to do the same? How can we empower people out there to become leaders?
Yeah, look, I think we need to have healthy conversations like the one we're having today. We need to know that to do it all, you don't have to have it all, and you can't be perfect all of the time. That there's going to be shit bits, and I'm allowed to say shit, right? Because I've now said it twice. there's going to be there's going to be bad bits, and I think you need to share like the good, the bad, and the ugly in order for people to know. I'm seeing a lot of perfectionism in the profession, both law and even, you know, outside with the HR practitioners that I work with. There's a lot of perfectionism, and we all kind of come here up thinking, you know, the type A personality, I've got to do this, or I've got the straight A grades, I'm going to get the good, you know, good, go to uni and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be a perfect mum, I'm going to be a perfect careers person. And ultimately, perfectionism, as lovely as an ideal as it is, it's unachievable. So I think we need to show leadership and actually sort of embrace each other in a way, and make it okay to find things challenging, and make it okay for things to go wrong occasionally. And we need to make sure that we're not opting out because we're basically having unrealistic expectations of ourselves and of each other. You know, that whole imposter syndrome piece, we need to push past that. So that's on the, you know, what we can do, the you know, as individuals, and how we help each other, but also in terms of, and I've got to say it because it's the piece that I work in terms of, you know, the bad behaviour, the discrimination, the sexual harassment, I mean, it's the bullying, the things that we see every day. I was quoting General Morrison before he became Australian of the Year. The standard you walk past is the standard you accept. You need to call it out, because the little stuff turns into bigger stuff. The, you know, Uber board CEO comment about women talking too much, that's what he says, you know, in the seminar that is about, you know, by Arianna Huffington, about the progression of women, and about things like sexual harassment. What does he say behind closed doors? You need to call the little stuff out, because the dysfunction perpetuates, and that's the only way that we're going to achieve cultural change. And that bystander piece is just as important as the you know, dealing with the offenders.
Absolutely. We've got probably a lot of questions out there, so we'll just do this last one for you.
Yeah.
So what's the best piece of advice that you've received or that you can leave us with today?
Okay. So I always wear the two hats. As a leader, only good can come from helping other women. Like, there is only good to be gained for ourselves personally, for our organisations, for the economy. So even if you've taken the stairs to the top, even if you've climbed those stairs and found it so hard, send the elevator back down and make it easier for the next generation, because only good can come from more women in the professions. And then personally, the quote that I sort of hold on to, and I've got Margie Worrell's book, and she signed it for me, saying, you know, live boldly, shine brightly, is that fear kills more dreams than failure ever will. So we need to push past our own personal boundaries as individuals and just go for it.
That's great. I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there, Jen.
It's actually, I think we've gripped everybody, and they've been hanging off every single word that you've been saying today.
Or they're falling asleep.
No, I'm watching it's been actually really interesting to watch, you know, the participants actually join us, and certainly we do have some questions for you. I find it interesting, just before I go into some of those questions, that I know you've obviously got your particular groups within the legal profession that go-to groups, I suppose, as part of your support network, but are there particular groups that I guess are not aligned to a profession or industry that you think women could become part of to help, I guess, build their platform for progression?
Yeah, look, there are, I mean, obviously all the industry associations such as yourselves have got the female networking groups, and it is brilliant to network within your own profession. But I think in terms of, you know, professional advisors, it's also good to expand, and it's actually a network not only for professional development but also business development. So they can be regional things like, you know, the Western Sydney Business Connection, for example, or it can be forums that you can join, both online, like through LinkedIn. There's a number of groups that you know will have discussions and dialogues on online platforms that then might have meeting points. We obviously have things like the New South Wales Women Lawyers Association, but there's also, I know, a Young Professionals Association that our lawyers go to. I'm not a young professional anymore, so unfortunately I didn't get invited to the ball.
None of us on this call are.
The cross between law and accounting and financial advisors is there's just so many. I suppose it's probably unfair to name some and not others.
Yeah, I agree with you, and obviously each profession will have its own unique groups as well. But look, rather than hold on to the dozens of questions that I feel like throwing at you, I'm going to go to some of the questions from the audience. And we do have a really interesting question that, as a mum and a working mum for some time, I can understand why this question has been asked. But a big barrier to flexibility at work for parents, though, is the lack of flexibility in childcare, both physically and financially. What are your views on how we as an industry can help combat that?
Look, I think subsidised childcare is something that, if employers are serious about getting women back to work sooner, is something, there are obviously things that the government can do in terms of childcare, and there are subsidies involved, but I'll take it from a government point of view first. I think that piece around grandparents and around broader villages that it takes to raise a child, being involved and being somehow remunerated to assist, I think would be helpful. But we're not all blessed with that, unfortunately. So I think then within, as organisations, I think that having childcare on site or subsidising childcare costs is something that is a critical part of bringing parents back into the workforce. And it could be like a hybrid arrangement in that you have, the flexibility for work, flexibility so that they are able to work more from home and on the days that they come in, then having some sort of a childcare subsidy arrangement in place for that. I know certainly some of the larger organisations have nanny services. They're so keen to get their people into work that even if you call in sick, they will send a nanny to your home. But that's obviously for a specific type of level of person that they're very keen to keep in the office. And that's not always the best thing. I know when my kids are sick, as mine was last time this webinar was supposed to be on. Sorry for that, everybody, but we were hospitalised. I would want to be there.
So things like tax deductibility of nannies or bringing them into the subsidy side of things could even be some of the answers as well. Yeah.
The tax deductibility of nannies is a huge one. I mean, there's no, even just for simplicity in engaging a nanny, there seems to be no real, procedures in place, exemptions in place. I mean, there are nanny services out there, but there's if normal mum and dad want to go out and engage a nanny, I mean, they are within sort of an industrial platform. There's no subsidy involved. You've got to pay, they're covered by the National Employment Standard. I mean, their market rates are significant. There's not really a whole lot out there. I'm an employment lawyer. I haven't quite done it yet, but I've looked into it and it's complicated. Yeah.
I would agree with you. Perhaps the government may, if they're listening in, perhaps they could take some tips from us. I'm pretty sure we'd have plenty to pass on. Here's another question and there's a little bit of tone in some of the other questions that are coming through, which is similar to this. And so I think it's worth asking. Do you have any particular advice for women trying to excel in their career but come up against harsh criticism from those around them in the workplace, particularly their own colleagues? And I think women, we do have a little bit of, particularly in Australia, the tall poppy syndrome exists. And sometimes our biggest enemies are from our own gender. And I think this is a worthwhile, whether it's particularly women or whether it's male, I do think, how do we deal with that criticism? And do you have any tips or support on that?
Yeah, the gender issue is one that I'm sort of get concerned about, because I think there's a big spotlight that is shined in circumstances where women are not helpful to each other. There's, in my opinion, like I said, there's that quote, there's a special place in hell for women that don't help other women. But nevertheless, it happens, and my concern about when it happens, aside from the fact that it does happen, is that men and bystanders looking in say things like, "You guys are your own worst enemies, you see. It's not the men you need to worry about, it's the women you need to worry about." And that is just toxic and terrible for a workplace. So I don't buy into, or I don't like to give too much of a megaphone to that, oh, women don't help each other out, because I think that it is the light that's shined on those exceptions rather than the rule. And you only need to look online and look at, sort of the forums that women have in place to support each other to know that that's not the case in the, sort of majority of cases. But when it comes to how do you advocate for yourself, how do you push past those barriers, I think, there are, like I said earlier, you need to look at your value, what you bring. You need to have access to the data. If they're not giving you transparent access to the data, you need to ask for it. If it's a peer that you've got a problem with, then absolutely you should be going up and having that conversation about sort of the quantitative data that you can get that will enable you to present your business case. If it is bullying and genuine harassment, then there should be complaints made. And quite frankly, if you're in a workplace that is not nurturing, or is not enabling, or is not making you feel like you are that they know your worth, you're probably better off leaving, because if your progression is stilted, then you're never going to feel enabled if there's someone that's trying to keep you down.
Would you think that that's also where you would bring a mentor in, that if you're getting this type of criticism, because sometimes criticism we take on board and maybe we need someone to deconstruct it, to actually say, well, maybe this bit you can listen to, this bit is a bit of rubbish or whatever, but maybe a mentor to also help you with that.
And we are, again, going back to sort of, perfectionism, we tend to be hypersensitive to criticism. We like to think that we can do it all and, be great all of the time. And so getting, actually being able to have that dialogue and understand, if there is some merit or there is some basis to some of the issues, being able to work through them and flip it on its head, because sometimes our strengths are also, our weaknesses. So being able to know how we can present them in a more favourable light might assist.
I think it's also probably too knowing when to escalate it between and beyond a conversation that you have between each other to, look, this is a serious problem. And I think it's recognising those signs and knowing how to escalate it and what that process is. I think there's a lot of companies, businesses, organisations out there that don't make that quite clear when you come up against a challenge or a negative situation with someone. You may be able to deal with it once, but if it's a repeat performance, then that's more than just a little bit of adversity. That's someone that's taking things beyond reasonable. And I guess that's probably something that I think as Inspire we can help people understand what's the process if I'm challenged in that way, and what should I be doing.
Yeah, and communication is healthy. Obviously, we're not at work to feel comfortable and, have group hugs. I mean, but there needs to be, that we're not also at work to be bullied and harassed and, sort of feel our trust and confidence is eroded. So I think that, in the first instance, you have the conversation with the individual and, try and, work through those issues, and then you escalate, from there if you need to.
So there's a couple of questions which I think are really, really cool. I think, we all experience adversity and we all need to tap into some confidence boosters. A couple of questions here around confidence boosters and what do they look like for you, but also any podcasts or books that you would recommend. Deb, you might like to even chime in on this question, because I think we all have our little favourite go-to books or videos or I know with me it's music. I spend a lot of time jumping around the house with music when things get a little tough. Anyway, it's embarrassing, and I'm glad no one can witness it. But the point in that is that we all have our confidence boosters, and I'd be interested to know what they are for you, for both of you, and if we can refer everybody to some of those.
Yeah, sure. Well, the book that I referred to earlier that I read was Margie Worrell's Stop Playing Safe. I love that book, and that's got so many tips in it. Suzanne Mercier's book I've read around imposter syndrome. Angela Priestley wrote a book which is different again, which has got different stories of various women, and follows the progress through their career. Women Who Seize the Moment. That's what it was called. It was a little while back. And then at the moment I'm reading Tracy Spicer's Good Girl Strip Bare. Haven't quite finished it. I should have finished it ages ago, but I keep getting interrupted with real life. But it's also, they're all very different. And I think there's different stages in your career and different stages in your mindset that you need to access those varying resources.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty much the same. Margie Worrell's book, I love Tara Moss, because Margie is very much about being brave, getting out there and finding your voice. Yeah. She deals with difficult conversations. So if anyone wants to think about, how do they deal with a difficult conversation, go and get the book Brave. They also have, podcasts on their website, that sort of thing. Yes, Suzanne Mercier is one for me. Who else? Oh, and obviously it's Tracy Spicer, because she's really cool anyway. But the other thing is, I actually sit and troll around on the internet, and I troll around for women's leadership issues, confidence around women, and even the Lean In Circle around Stanford comes out with some fabulous material about how you can negotiate better, how you can get up there and find your voice and do public speaking really well. If you go onto the Stanford website, you can go down and have a look at some of the lecturers for the Executive Women's Program. And there's a few there that do a lot of really, really good podcasts around confidence. And I would certainly, and look, we can supply this afterwards for everybody who's hooked on. But these are really great things to listen to. And they do it very well in some of the universities overseas.
And Women's Agenda, again, is a daily boost of just information, and just quick and easy. It's my lunchtime read. It's quick and easy to access. But then, a lot of those articles that they publish, a lot of the things that they put out, then obviously can feed back into other sources as well. And it stays very current and topical.
There's a really good professor in Stanford called Deborah Gruenfeld, Professor Deborah Gruenfeld. If you Google her, as I said, we can give it to you later on. She's got some great some of them are long, some of them take about 30 minutes, but they are very worth listening to.
Yeah, I've been listening to Alison Hill's podcasts. They're absolutely mind-blowing, and she's done a lot of interviews. They're called Standout Life, and she's interviewed a number of women that, entrepreneurs, some that are startups, some that have been working in their profession for many, many years, and they are they're great just to put in the ears, listen to. He does have a book, but I find the podcasts, because they're one-on-one interviews, quite interesting, and it's quite a diverse range of women from all different fields and professions that she interviews. So it's well worth listening to those podcasts if you get the moment. Really like this question. We've probably got maybe 2 more questions that I can try and squeeze in, because there's heaps of them. There's a couple of questions here around, and this is getting back to diversity, not necessarily being about females specifically, but obviously culture and both genders in that sense. But have you got any stats or any information on women working aged over 50 compared to men in leadership? We don't see, I know that there's some talk around ageism and around both young women getting opportunity on boards, but also older women getting opportunity on boards. And also just, is it harder for men as opposed to women to, to be able to achieve, continue their career progression in that space?
I haven't actually seen statistics that break down our representation by then age. Alarmingly, well, I suppose probably because they would be so alarming, given how underrepresented we are, even as an amalgam. But I can't even speak anecdotally in that I don't have, enough personal examples to draw upon to say, yes, there is an absolute trend in one direction or another. I mean, I certainly know, women that are well into their 50s that are represented on boards, and there are a lot of aspiring women, in their sort of late 30s, early 40s that I know that are trying to get on board or just getting on board. So I think we really do need to increase our representation, and the age discrimination issue is one of those pieces that comes around, that comes up quite often, and it comes up in that unconscious bias piece as well. And the fact that, even in terms of, aging, we're met at a disadvantage in that, men, I still hear in law all the time, we'll put this lawyer in front of this client because, a little bit of grey hair will help out. We hide our grey hair. I mean, it's not, as women, it's not seen as much as a benefit, or you hear that concept of gravitas in a man. If a woman's got gravitas, she's a bitch. It's just that it's hard. But I do think that definitely we have double jeopardy, triple jeopardy. As a culturally diverse, aging woman, I'm in all sorts of trouble.
Oh my goodness! I think you've definitely entertained us, Faye. Look, I think there's a couple of questions here that I would like to position to both of you. Perhaps Faye, you would answer first. Fiona has mentioned, I guess character traits, personality types. Do we need to be super competitive, but like almost the fighter syndrome where you've literally, like you said, you have to fight for your promotion or fight for things? I mean, there was certainly plenty of discussion at International Women's Day about the fact that women are reticent to step up and put themselves forward for opportunity. And I would argue that, but that's probably personal circumstance than, the norm. And the other thing is that, the need to be perfect. Is this part of the DNA type that we need to have this sort of, I guess, bust the myth that we need to be perfect to actually gain the promotion as well?
Yeah, we definitely don't need to be perfect, and if we're waiting to be perfect, we'll never be promoted. That's unequivocal. We do need to be kinder to ourselves, and we need to, like I said, not accept that we meet 100% of the criteria before we ask for the promotion, or we put ourselves forward for the promotion or the new job or the new opportunity. But I think there is a lot around that piece around. It's not that we're not competitive, or it's not that we're not hungry or ambitious. It's in fact that we don't want to be perceived as such because of the negative connotations that come with it. So there's only two ways. There's two ways we can combat that. We need to push back past our own personal boundaries and do it in a way, like I said, that is respectful and about value and about contribution and about fulfilling the purpose of the organisation and the mission and the objectives and the KPIs. And it's about the dialogue about what we bring. And even personally, I know that allows me to push past that barrier because I'm not going in thinking I'm entitled. I'm going in thinking that I'm actually contributing and adding value. And if it's good for them that I'm here, and it's good for me that I'm here, and it's a win-win-win. So that's definitely what we can do personally. But I think as organisations and leaders, we need to recognise that those stereotypes do exist. We need to go some way in increasing transparency around these discussions, providing that data so that they can have those discussions, opening up the dialogue and saying, it is expected that you will make submissions about your pay or your contribution, or it is, we encourage women to apply for these roles, or you know, to do the little things that will fight against the biases that we know exist, and as leaders to recognise that, you know, that in ourselves, and to not perceive you know, the woman as being aggressive because she's asked for the, you know, for a pay rise, as opposed to the man who has, you know, gravitas because of his presence when he walks in the room, like, you know, that sort of thing. So it's individual, it's organisational, and then it's the leadership piece as well.
I guess, Jen, I might come to this from the individual point of view. I think the first thing that we need to understand is we need to be ourselves. Don't try and be somebody else. Don't look at that other role and think, I've got to act like that person, I'm going to speak like that person. I went through that years ago, seriously. I put my hair in a bun and I wore pearl earrings, and it was not me. And because it wasn't me, I couldn't do the job really well. Actually, I've got a very funny photo, Jenny, you'll love it. Because I thought that was what was expected of me. So as soon as I lost that and said, you know what, I am who I am, I gained confidence. And as soon as I gained the confidence, I then gained the confidence to take myself out of my comfort zone. So when I saw something that I wanted to do, my very first board position, and I thought, the first thing that goes through your mind is, can I do this? Can I do this? And I sat back and thought, you know what, if there's a bit that I don't know how to do, I'll go learn it. But let's go in and jump full force off the cliff. And then once you do that, you see your confidence lift so much. And next time it becomes easier. So you've got to believe in yourself, you've got to have confidence, and absolutely be authentic. Absolutely be authentic.
That authenticity piece, good point, is that, you know, it's so true, because I know that, you know, sort of having the background I had, and when I came into pedigree land, I felt quite stifled, and I was not the robust, tenacious person who's been dropping swear words today. But you know, I did find that I was moderating a lot, and I'd go to cocktail parties and I would not know what to say, because I felt like I had to join other people's conversations that I didn't understand, and I didn't know what to talk about. It wasn't until and then I would feel almost a bit shameful that I had, you know, sort of digressed the conversation into a direction, you know, or to a level that I felt more comfortable in. And then I realized that that's how I was connecting with people, and, you know, the whole practice has been built around, you know, people that I've connected with. And I now work with people that I like to work with, because if they like me, they give me work, and I generally like them, and I like to come to work every day. You don't want to work with people that you don't connect with.
Great points, both of you. I want to see that photo, Deborah Kent, definitely. And a swear word.
I've got one photo somewhere too.
I seriously,
up with the website.
I definitely think that belongs in the Inspire Facebook page group, Inspire group.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of takeouts in this that I think certainly we do need to keep pushing government, and certainly those that have the ear of government around some legislative reform to support women, but diversity in general. And I think that, you know, those that have that voice, we need to be using it wisely. And if we don't speak up for ourselves, then no one's going to ask us, you know, because there's other things. And the other thing from my perspective is that, you know, I'm just going through the process of employing somebody at the moment to work in my business. And I started to sort of just, discredit. And then I sort of went, hang on, if this was in reverse, how would I feel? And I would be mighty angry that I wasn't being considered. So I think there's a big part for women in sitting down and looking at roles, and whether it's a board position or whether it's just simply an employment role that they want to go for, and putting down all their capabilities and going, well, look, these are all the things I can do, and these are the things that the job says that it would like me to have, but how good am I at learning that, at picking that up in the learning curve as I go into that role? And that's the difference, I think, between the way men think and women think. They bluff their way through some of this stuff, whereas women, we wear our hearts on our sleeves a little bit, and we don't tend to just go, you know what, I can grow and build and learn that part and put myself forward for that opportunity. And certainly for my first board position, I think my knees were literally knocking when I went in there, I was one of 6 board members. In other words, I was the one woman, and there were 5 senior gentlemen sitting around the table, and I don't think I uttered a word the entire first board meeting. And in fact, I don't think I uttered a word for 3 months because I was terrified. And then I just sort of went, well, hang on a second. You're not silent at home. You're not silent when you're in the car with your kids. Why are you being silent now? So again, that's then looking and as you have both said, using your tools and resources. So whether it's mentors, whether it's podcasts, books, or a bit like me, dancing around the house listening to music, it's indulging in those things and then finding it in yourself, your voice, your personal voice, to go, it's okay, I can have a go. And what's the worst that can happen? You might not get it. Well, that happens a lot in all aspects of your life. So you just keep trying. I believe in being Woody Woodpecker in that stuff. So I cannot thank you enough, Faye. It's been absolutely brilliant listening to your story. And I seriously meant it with the questions and things that have come through. I did try to get to most of them. I have tried to sandwich a few of them together just to make sure we got through as many of them as we could. Deb, as always, great contributions. Thanks for being the host. And look, I'm sure we will be indulging in some more AFA Inspire webinars. Great topics. We do definitely want to hear more from the community out there, not just Inspire, but from you in general, about some of the topics you'd like to hear more about. Definitely know that Faye is on LinkedIn, and she's also a Twitter fiend, which is why I love her. So please make sure you reach out to her. And if you've got anything that we have missed in the session today, please pop over to the Inspire group on Facebook and drop something in there, and we'll do our best to get some responses for you and feed through some of the recommendations that we've put through today. As I said, we will be making this video available to you. Long as the session has been, it is time to wind it up. So thank you, Faye. Thanks, Deb. And I look forward to catching you all again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.